Seven Vortex, I think, is very unique. It's one of a kind in its own universe, because oftentimes people think that it's just a mapping tool. And I think you see the value because you are close to nature and because you work in permaculture. So we know that we need to tell a story in a different way. So for me, the storytelling tool that I was needing as a way of expression, because I was never able to tell my stories. Like I think I'm closer to your mind, maybe, because I see connection in things. So let's say, for example, we can put here your seven vortex just to try to explore how it works. But here we see the media as a media, and then the youth part, the youth, the permaculture. And also as a networking tool. This networking tool could help us also to showcase projects. And this is as a fundraising. It's like this, raising. And in the fundraising, you will have donors. No, donors with one N.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the next challenge to me, right? It's my second language, and in French, and things just change a little bit.
It's my first language, and I still can't spell.
Yeah, and then
I don't with words. That's why I like the visual. You know, it's much more like.
You were saying that it's about the people,
Mm-hmm.
but these people is actually connecting with the projects.
Yeah.
And in this part of investors, it is also about, I think, giving a different perspective in the way of disrupting finance. But I wouldn't say that it's in the aggressive way. At least when I say it in an artistic way, it's more about getting in there, understanding what they need, and bringing a tool that adds value to them for taking better decisions.
Yeah.
So you don't have to fight against, but it's actually, you can be as sexy as a flower, and then bringing the attention in a very positive way.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, like changing the perspective in finance, especially around nature, because what I see as a common factor of the financial people is that they're very close to the cities,
Mm-hmm.
which is where the money it is concentrated, and it is where the money and economics that is very close related to power in general.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very important for them to know that in between the desk and nature, there are actually projects that are helping nature, and this nature is helping us somehow in the planet. And this planet, it is what makes cities to be around there. So you cannot just stay with the cities and get rid of the planet. So I was in this Humanity Rising conference during 5 days. And I was just mapping last week about cities rising. And it was for me difficult because I do see this like competition in between. Well, cities are getting energy from the planet, but not adding value. But when you see them as a living organism, and they should be adding value. So this is the change that we need to create on this. And this change, I think, so right now it is more like this, we say, this is just a picture, but it goes from here. So maybe getting like this relationship right will help us to actually have a better perspective on nature, and then add value to the system as a whole, because what nature gives us is like a habitat, air. We need air for breathing, and sometimes it's difficult to put value on that. But for example, with COVID now, you understand that you need oxygen at some point. So breathing seems to be important. We need
We
water.
all,
We need
and so
water.
just
Mm.
if I could just interrupt for a second for people who might watch this recording. So the different connections that you made there with the orange and then purple, those are showing the type of relationships. So the cities and the planet, it's like a predatory relationship there, as the cities are taking more from the planet,
Yeah.
and not returning so much right now. Whereas then the purple, that represents more of a mutual relationship.
Yes.
If they change their perspective and connect with nature more.
Yeah. So this is what makes Seven Vortex totally different, because or you have food chain biological perspective on software, or you have mind mapping on their own and graphing tools. But first of all, this is about enhancing humanity. So bringing experience into a visual level and making it digital. And then by connecting all these things, you have the opportunity to set up biological relationships. So what I understood for living in ecosystem, not just from studying it, because that is for me important, because it came from being in connection with nature. I understood that it was about life, it is about the interdependencies that happens in the ecosystem. And the same is true for every system. So cities, finance, it is about the exchanges. And usually we think about the changing values, but what you see as a pattern in biological relationships is the exchange of energy. So there are 6 types of relationships. So collaboration, commensalism, which is zero and positive, neutralism, amensalism, predation, which is this one taking the energy, this one losing it, and competition. So for me, it was very striking, because usually, as I also have a background in business and coming from business, then I learn about how to do business by competing. So this is what happens with money, like makes you compete, and therefore they are both losing energy. So this is just nonsense in many ways. So I say, if I think about a market and then I think about an ecosystem, how they relate in these exchanges of value, if the money, it is the currency in the market, what is the currency in the ecosystem? And it seems clear to me that it is about energy. And the explanation, when we think about this human-made system, we think also about systemic loops. And it is causal effect. So I affect you. But the real thing is that you see the full picture is I affect you and you affect me. So we all have a perspective on the relationship, but it is about a relationship in between both. And this is what nature tells us all the time. So we affect each other, and that relationship could change over time. So for example, the idea here is how to move from a predatory relationship with the planet to a collaborative relationship, or to a symbiotic relationship, or mutualistic relationship. And as a matter of fact, this is how niche differentiation is also happening in nature. So for example, the flower and the bird, they've been over time, over millions of years, they've been trying to get into the right match, so they can co-evolve over time. And it is one adding value to the other. So every time that we live in the present, we are kind of adding value to the next layer. And so now we cannot get back and understand a system without trees, without flowers, without bees, because they add so much value to the tissue of life that you will create a big disturbance. But humanity doesn't seem to be the case right now. And that seems to be because we are a young species. So one of the questions that I got in my mind after studying all these evolutionary processes is, what is the human ecological niche? And if everyone seems to be adding value except us, especially the cities, and the money, it is not something that adds real value to the system in biological terms, then how come are we going to understand what is our value if all our focus is in money? So we need to make better investments. And an optimal metabolism is that one that keeps the energy flowing all the time. Right now, capitalism seems to be like diabetes, because you have so much money in some bank accounts that is not circulating, that it is
Yeah.
not even against capitalism on its own. It's also another system. But what if we can, instead of maximizing, what I understood from ecosystems is that it's about optimizing.
Yes. Love that.
So this is what permaculture does as well. You
Exactly.
are trying to optimize in a human-made system, and if you let just the wilderness to rewild again, then this balance will be found without human intervention in general over time. So this is kind of the difference. So if we can find, like, if we can mature as a species, instead of thinking about fighting as little boys for territory or killing each other, if we appreciate life and then we bring this conversation, we level up the conversation, then we need better tools for investment. And we need to understand. And if you haven't been on the ground, on the field, on nature, then it's very difficult to understand. So I realized, for example, in nature or London or all these uh, financial capitals, they have no more connection with nature. So it's very difficult to explain the value of something like this. Because, for example, here in Belgium or in Central Europe, there are not any more primary forest.
Yeah. Wow.
The full chain is broken. The full
Yeah.
food chain is broken. So
Yeah.
for many generations, they haven't been in contact with real nature.
Yeah. Well,
And that is part of the reason why we don't respect natives and indigenous people and their knowledge, because we keep thinking that we hold the truth as being like above everyone. But because we don't respect the fact that one culture has been there understanding its place. So it is this relationship with the place by working that makes you part of this place. But cities are always the part that made us collapse in many civilizations. So we have this opportunity, whether we do it right or we collapse again, and then instead of visiting pyramids, we'll be visiting Manhattan in 1,000 years.
yeah. Yeah, totally. So when you present Seven Vortex to people that are more city based and separated from nature, do you present it in a different way? Or do you
So it
still?
depends. It has a lot to do with the intention. What do you want to present, and what is the point that you want to make? So, for example, in this case, nature could be at the end, and maybe the cities could be in the beginning. And then we can start saying by like cities, money, and economics, or we can start by the money, which is often the case, or economics and money. So this could be the entry point for these kind of things. But we have to say that cities are killing or are the other way around. So cities are extractive and the economy is also extractive. So it is like this. And then what nature does is actually the other way around. So it is adding value to the system. So we need to find a way where we can actually behave like the context, because otherwise you are just fighting against something that is there, that is kind of the universal laws are surrounding us. And of course we can change everything as machines, but the machines, they work as different parts and you can implement it in different ways, but nature works as an organism. So it is also about the whole. If they take your arm just like this, then your arm would move maybe like the tail of a lizard, but wouldn't be part of the system anymore. So we cannot dissect nature in the way that we are doing. So it really depends on what you want to say. And for example, if let's say that we want to get into investors, so is this perspective maybe the one that it is important? So we think about people, and then we start separating. So it is not just accessing information, but it's really about curating the information, the thing that it is now the important part to do. So how are you gonna put it in a way that actually makes sense for your audience? And you have to be adaptive to your audience. So in this way, for example, we can use Seven Vortex as a starting point. So maybe we start by the cities, maybe we start by nature.
And each one of these, like if I clicked on cities, I could then have it so there's information there and what we're talking about, and
So
even
this is cities,
films.
and then I put a star, and now I'm looking it from the stars, so I can have entry points. So for example, I will start with investors. So our conversation with investors is that they are connected with fundraising. It is about investing in people, and they come from the cities, for example. So if you want to go in the story of nature, then nature is about adding value to the planet, and we need to make this stronger perspective with investors. So this is the part that you want to tell. So it is something that you need to prepare beforehand. So for example, all the projects, they can showcase their ecosystem in a way that makes sense in the storytelling. So it is a tool that is available for everyone, and we all need to find our best way of telling our story in a systemic way. There is also this opportunity from the view mode where you have the 3 stars, and then this means that you have all the stars as an entry point.
Okay, yeah.
So you can start just connecting here and then coming there.
And now then, like, is it like Miro, where you could then link all of this stuff so that as I clicked on cities, it would then open up whatever?
So for example, I can put a link here, and I can put the date and time, a color. And it is just with 6 colors, because this is what, not more than 7 in total, a mind could handle in an easy way. Otherwise, it becomes too complicated. And this is what happens oftentimes when you have too many colors in a place.
Yeah. Is that part of like 7 Vortex, the name? I'm curious also.
Yeah, it is the 6 connections, and that makes another center, right? So it's 7 is the lucky number, and vortex is the shape in nature that actually it is very powerful, like the golden ratio. So I was saying that it goes into different parts. So for example, as a media, I use it. And so Miro and Kumu is more about dumping a database and then connecting the database. We cannot do that in 7 Vortex, because it's about bringing the experience that we have in our conversation. Miro is about post-its, but then I believe that your knowledge is kind of lost. So what we are doing here is putting all this knowledge, because it is knowledge center. It is not just a whiteboard what matters. It is the knowledge. And what I saw is that the internet was giving us a lot of fat as knowledge. And after traveling everywhere, as you've been traveling as well, you could realize that solutions were there. They were not just they were not connected yet. So I said, if we have a better use of the internet, then we can create the connections. So by empowering local perspectives, so maybe indigenous people could come here and show their perspective. And by connecting solutions, then we can get into muscles instead of just fat. Right? And so this is what happens in 7 Vortex. We have a community that I've been sharing like word of mouth. And now there are about 3,000 people. So I wasn't doing marketing or just going for the profits, because I thought that it was important to do something authentic, like grassroots community. So just by connecting like this, you can see that most of the topics, they have to do with regeneration, with like biomimicry, sustainability, circular economy, permaculture, whatever. So for example, if we put here permaculture, I never done it, I think. Permaculture. So all these vortex, they have information around permaculture.
Wow. Yeah.
It is already there.
Can we click on one to see as an example of
Yeah,
what?
totally. Which one do you want? This one? Or which one?
Any of them, whatever you think
So
would be a good example.
it is just an inspiration source or a creativity source. So it is not about if it's true or not, but people are putting here things that let them connect information. So for example, this is about a systemic lecture. When the machine, like for example in Kumu, is making you all the arrangement, then you are missing the opportunity to curate your information. So you cannot express anymore, but it's the machine that is expressing. It looks really beautiful because it is kind of circular but maybe you just want to make a different point. So where is the possibility of humans to stay creative and to create the information? So here, for example, this is collaborative. So in my case, I will be able to get here and then to add bubbles. I'm not gonna do it because I don't need it, but let's say that it becomes a systemic lecture. So let's see what the stars are in here. So communication strategy, actions, food production, I don't know, bioregional food security. I think this is interesting. I never seen it before. So healthy food include people, food production, food distribution, low carbon. So all this information is giving us a context. What we cannot see in a book, it's this contextualized information. So when you see a contract, for example, you see the contract in 200 pages or 100 or 10 pages, but the issues are connected in between them. So section 1 is connected with section 20, but visually you don't see it. And I use mind maps because this is the way that we understand information. I couldn't find a mind mapping tool that was appealing to me as was the case for you. But then we can also study, for example, the relationships. So how the SDGs, this specific curator user, is thinking that is helping the transition to safeguard health, food, and well-being. And then we come here and we see even some tags, some content, and then we can keep going. And in some of them, there might be content, some of them, they might not be. So we can also perform a search. So we come here and we center. So for example, we say here about food. And then all the bubbles that they have food inside, they will be highlighted with the pink. And if they have an image, then the image will come on a first place. So this allows you to understand the knowledge in a different way, which is something that nobody else has touched in tapping into this collective knowledge. So actually, Seven Vortex is more like a collective intelligence system that is based in biomimicry as a whole. But since I use existing technology, it looks very similar to what you have around because it looks like a mind mapping tool.
Yeah.
But what I've been doing here, and that is more for like the technical part, the Neo4j, it is something that is graph database. So they moved from Excel spreadsheets into graphs. So they are using Euler mathematics, which is a mathematics that is more about labyrinths and layouts. So there are, which says to find the easiest, the closest route in between this and this, then it is about the relationships. It is not about cells, because when you have a cell here and a cell there, then you have to do 2 times the whole table to find relationships. But when you branch it, like the trees, then you can go through the relationships, through the branches, and find the shortest path. So that has given artificial intelligence and the opportunity to reduce the times in performing searches, like for 3 seconds to 0.03, for example.
Wow.
It's amazing because,
yeah.
because they are, when I came back from my isolation in nature, I was having Seven Vortex in mind. And then I found this as a database. And I say, well, this is what I need, because actually it is native of seven vortex, except that they can use any kind of relationships. And what I want to underline, it is the biological relationships, because I think this is the narrative that we need for sustainability, for regeneration, and for biomimicry. And, and we need to have a perspective on how nature works from a biological perspective. So this is not biological, this is just mathematical and coding.
Well, people with no eco literacy, they can still use seven vortex. So they're just not. Yeah.
Yeah, and they, even people, like, for example, I thought also about indigenous people. When they use seven vortex, it is easier than if you try to make them write a book or write a paper.
Yeah.
So how are we going to bring the knowledge from scientific world and from indigenous world into one single place? Because Kumu, for example, as you said, was very difficult for you to use it. It wasn't that friendly. And it was the same case for me.
Yeah.
You can imagine how that would be for indigenous people.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So if we, I think the sense of belonging to the territory and the knowledge should be a new asset around territories. And this knowledge, it is not just people living in the cities, it's people also farming around, knowing about the seasons, indigenous people, and we cannot afford to lose that knowledge as humanity. So I'm thinking more as a species. And we need to connect this knowledge instead of trying to disaggregate it and saying this is better than this one. In some of the legends, in some of the learning, in some of the poems, there's so much knowledge that we can get if information is connected. If nobody is connecting this information, then whenever we get to realize this thing, it's gonna be too late.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
it's our relationships, and then our knowledge and stuff is part of our social capital that we're bringing, and need to be sharing with the right people right now. So we're making these collaborations around the world happen so much faster.
Exactly. And what I realized being in these ecosystems is that it is not about the critical mass as we think on democracy.
Yeah.
It is about critical connections as the market happens, like Silicon Valley, Wall Street, even wars, right? But if we use this intention in a different direction, then it could work. And then they work with all sorts of companies, goods and bads, but it is because they work very well.
Yeah.
So as a technology, this is where Seven Vortex is on the top. So it is using this as a backend, which I don't know what the others are using, because it is not just about the front end. So I made accessible this kind of technology to, I democratize the entry point for AI, if you wish, right? And because this is AI native. Right now, we are not.
Oh, okay. Are AI companies using it yet?
Yeah. This is AI engines. So
no, I meant, are they using Seven Vortex yet?
No, because Seven Vortex on its own, it doesn't have AI yet. Yes. But it is native with this technology that is being used for other AIs.
So it could happen. Yeah.
GraphAware is our team of development in Seven Vortex. And GraphAware is kind of the consulting #1 in Europe for Neo4j. And they've been helping me since 2017. But because they saw the potential, they understand the mathematics, and they got from mathematics, I got from nature, and they decided to help me. So right now, they are doing this kind of thing. So for example, they are working in different projects in different countries, such as Australia, Emirates, Arabs, and they are doing this kind of AI processes. So they keep developing. So it is a co-evolutionary process where I evolve the front end and I bring other kinds of insights, and they evolve the AI part on their own. So they've been using Seven Vortex for like inspiration, and I've been using them also for understanding how AI works. So they put all this information inside, and they can go into your organization, bring PowerPoints, PDFs, putting all together, and then giving you from data to wisdom, as they call it. So they are also working in knowledge ecosystems, but so I'm bringing the biology into this conversation. I thought it was also important to join the conversation from a biological point of view as a biomimicry professional, because most of these guys, they are super smart, but they are like financial people, not very related to nature.
And so how are they accepting that? Are they, you said they're using it as inspiration. So
Yeah, and they are helping me. And they say that I have a purge engine in a beetle body. And I'm fine with that. But because, for example, now what we are doing, and now we are both more ready. For example, when we come to I'm gonna jump into the media part of Seven Vortex. So I'm using it, and this could be useful for the youth permaculture as a magazine. So every time that I have 7 links, then I come here and I make maps of 7 with the same principle that just you can just handle seven elements easily without being systemic. So if you come here, then you can recognize the symbol, which is Hume, the one that I just showed you. And now we are running the beginning of the AI. And this is just entity recognition. So it is recognizing, the computer is recognizing that it's talking about Germany, which is a country, an organization, a place, and in some parts also about people. So with this, what we are doing is connecting, you can connect, for example, Encyclopedia of Life. So if you come here and then you are making your map or your vortex, and then the suggestions will come from trusted sources like Ask Nature. I don't know if you're familiar with Ask Nature as well. So I wanted Ask Nature to connect here. And then bringing all this natural knowledge, natural based solutions, whatever you want to call it, and inform your perspective. So you have a deeper knowledge around nature. But the original, let's say, intention on Seven Vortex is connecting knowledge around nature. Because if we don't understand it, it's very difficult to appreciate it, to put the right value on it. So I jumped into the digital realm from being unplugged from the internet and being in nature, because that was my call. And then I said, well, this is what I need to do, and this is where I need to jump. Now I feel I need to jump into finance in a way. So this is just the first part, and I think we're addressing already like the possibility, for example, for the media, for youth permaculture. We're also getting here into how to map a network. So for example, well, this is a project, how to map a project. This is Mamoni Valley Preserve. So they are doing collaborations. This is a university, the foundation, this is the place. So now for the first time, they can present themselves as a system, which is not in a database. They know that it's a system, but usually these kind of projects, they don't have the tools to present themselves as a system. So the way that they are presenting, it is using this, and then they go into the organization, and then you have the Mamoni Valley Preserve, the foundation, the school, and then from there, they can show projects. So this is a whole different game if you can present yourself like this, because usually they think that you are messy and you go everywhere. But if there is, of course, order in between that systemic thinking, but if you can show it, and if you can tell the story. So this is what is helpful. In terms of education, for example, in this media lab as well, I put the biographs. So the biographs, it is about people that I think they're doing cool things, or they were doing cool things, like E.O. Wilson. And then this is an open knowledge source for schools to understand it. And I thought that if we can do this, then it will be easier for everyone we can accelerate innovation and knowledge transfer. So in biomimicry functions, as you know them, for me, it was about knowledge transfer. How can we accelerate innovation so we can thrive? And if the digital tissue is what we have nowadays, then how to infuse nature into that tissue? So this is a possibility. And then we can also go to ecosystems or networks. So for example, I remember one that it was about regenesis.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention the regenescence earlier when you said, it's not going to take that many people. It's just the quality. So yeah.
This is not too big, but this is about
Mm.
regenerate from Austin, Texas, Bay Area, and New Zealand. So this is a way to map a network. If we go, for example, to ecosystem restoration camps,
Mm-hmm.
I bet you're familiar with John.
Yes, yeah. And I work very closely with Abundant Earth Foundation and Ecosystem Restoration Camps, the whole
So
organization.
here, for example, you can map the conversation from ecosystem restoration LA.
Can
But
we look at that real quick? I want to see what they've done recently.
this is one that I created for them in a conversation. So they, for example, right now, the ecosystem restoration camps is about central kitchen, regenerative agriculture, and creator space. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they saw this emerging in their conversation, it was very useful for them because it was live. So from their own conversation, they were able to see what we were trying to understand. So humanity behavior and the purpose of life. And in LA, they have this home gardening industry that has opportunities in the roof and parking lots, for example. So the community is made out of young people, veterans, urban networks, farmers, volunteers, homeless, indigenous culture. So what are we going to do with this ecosystem restoration camp? And what kind of like ingredients they were mentioning that we need to address to have functional ecosystems with real ecological functions and supporting an evolutionary succession process. So there is one, for example, and if we go back to restoration, let me see if I can find it here. So they are using it as a knowledge hub map. So this is about, I didn't do this one, but it's collaborative. So they were just understanding also the value of seven vortex for their own. And we can see the ecosystem restoration camps. So ecosystem, what is all about? It is restoration, regeneration, regenerative agriculture. So this is a story that I can jump on my own and try to understand. And this is, I think, beautiful. So what kind of plants and how do they see the plants? So it's about cities person. Yeah.
Do any of them then have more information, or they're just the words right now? And
It depends
okay,
on each curation.
whether they
So
set it up,
some of
yeah,
them they will be, but just as a system, it is
yeah,
giving you already a context.
yes,
So
it's so
my
beautiful too.
intention is that in the future, this graph database, as you saw it, it is very similar to this.
Yeah,
So we can inform artificial intelligence that I need to understand something more than this. So bring all this knowledge together and give me something that adds value to this kind of narrative. From your Encyclopedia of Life, from As Nature, from different sources. So that will foster the understanding of many of the things that we see. If there are species, if, for example, native plants, what is native plants? So maybe Wikipedia will give us something, and then you can just enrich the content by connecting to the right sources.
mm-hmm. Oh,
So
beautiful.
yeah, this is all about. Then there is a second layer, which I think is interesting for you, which is around the place. And I think, I don't, well, you just saw it in that quick presentation, but since you are interested in all this, I think it's important just to go quick on this one.
Yeah.
Then the one layer is the knowledge, and then it is the perspective. So this is more for the financial world, this tool, which is called Virtual Gaia. So as you know, carbon offsetting, it is the main trade-off for financial world into the environment.
Mm-hmm. Wait, I'm sorry. What did you say this program was called?
Virtual Gaia,
The, say it again. Virtual Gaia?
Virtual Gaia, like this.
Virtual Gaia. Yes. Okay. I love it. It's beautiful too. Wow, with the rivers and everything mapped
Yeah.
out. Oh,
So
it's beautiful.
as humanity, we have the perspective on blue marble, but a blue marble intrinsically doesn't have any life.
Mhm.
So for me, it was more about this Isle of Blue in the middle of the galaxy on one side, global biosphere on another side. And then I found a better translation that is a metabolic Earth,
Mm.
because all living things are metabolic. They have metabolism. So if we take this idea on Gaia, that is also from Humboldt and like many others that they've been tipping there, then what if we can understand it from the space with the tools that we have now? Because science is kind of limited by the tools of observation that we have at that given time. But if the intention is that, then how can we put layers that actually let us understand the metabolic earth in a different way? So the first thing that I thought is, let's see the blue vein. Oh, I'm gonna make it more contrast, so you could see, but of course this is not a straight business. It is more about really changing the perspective in the beginning, and this is why I need the fundraising, because now, well, I need to make it work as a business and to give the force of the business, but a new generation of business. So I'm gonna take out the climate part. I'm gonna take out the vortex on the top of the territory, and then we will see the blue vessels. And this is giving us like our body when we see our circulatory system. And this is just the surface, because there is another part that is on the underground.
Wow.
But for example, this is where the Fertile Crescent started, and it is not a Fertile Crescent anymore. So my assumption is that agriculture over time has created deserts.
Yeah, and deforestation.
Yeah, for the armies,
For the agriculture, yeah.
and for the wars as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you go here, then you will see the veins of the planet in one way. Then I saw this bioregional approach in a regenerative communities network with John Fullerton and all these amazing communities such as the GRC. And I use their technology to put another layer here. So instead of having these political divisions, we have now both, like watersheds and bioregions. And that becomes interesting because, for example, these bioregions, you can see that one side of the river and the other side of the river. So I don't know, there might be more things around it, but if we never put this perspective, then it's super difficult to understand it because you have to imagine it. And this is not what we should be doing, because that becomes harder especially if you come from the city. And I come from Mexico City, so it's nothing despective, but it was difficult for me until I went to nature, and then coming back, I thought about using the tools for giving this perspective. So if we go to climate, then let's go to climate and you will see what it goes. So if we think about these gases, we see that these gases, they belong to a specific pattern, which is cities. So we are polluting. The developed world is polluting a lot, especially these parts. So it might be not specific gases, but we might have even more. But this is the way that we are polluting as a planet. We've been taught.
How do you know which gas is which?
It's NO2, SO2, and CO.
But
This
I
is
mean,
the
like,
gases that are available. I'm not so sure. So this is why, the developer put whatever was available by request of one of our scientific guys in the team. And I said, well, it's fine. Like I would like to see actually the planet breathing, because it is not about how much CO2 you capture, but about how much oxygen you produce and how you're breathing in and breathing out. So my assumption is that if we can get into that tool, then we'll be able to understand the value of specific places. So he put this without me knowing exactly what is.
Okay.
But then let's go to humidity and wind. And then we'll see that humidity and wind happens like, more concentrated in these specific places, especially humidity, which is water floating around. So we often say that the planet lungs are in the Amazons, but the climate zones are very well defined. So this Isle of Blue has a tropical core. And if we want to understand this as a system, then it's in the tropical core where we somehow believe that life was originated, and where you have more biodiversity happening. So let's say even if what we are trying to go is toward abundance, and if our mentor is nature, then this is the place to be, or the place to learn from, because it's the most abundant biodiversity in the planet. But it is not just in the Amazons, it is also in Africa, and it is also in Asia. So it is just this tropical core that we should all be, as a species, taking care of to stabilize the planet. So this is just in the terms of the climate. But until here, it doesn't really make a difference into finance. So say, well, we need to understand the territory as an asset, because this is the way that it works. So you have a specific place in a specific part of the world, you are investing, and these are about 7,000 something hectares of land. And it's primary forest. So the green part is primary forest, and then you have agriculture getting yellow. If you go there, then you will see that this property, which is called the Mamoni Valley, so you saw University and the Mamoni Valley, and we can see the properties here. This is how we have divided as the political divisions that we have done. It's fine, this is the way it is, so we have to start from there. We can also see the land use, but we can also see the rivers. So what if from the space we can take care of the watersheds, for example, instead of just putting price on the scarcity? And then the demarcation of the territory that is analyzed. But if we also add the 7 vortex layer, which is where it just makes the conjunction or the overlap, then we can see that here there is knowledge. So for the moment, I just have one out of, I don't know, maybe are 20 or 50, but for the moment I was just able to put one. So this is more like an MVP. And this MVP gives you information from Tamsin. Tamsin is a biomimicry professional that wrote about superorganism, that is the dean of the University Biocultural Leadership School. So
wow, where's that school?
This land is in University in Panama, in the place that we are analyzing, exists this school.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a natural preserve. So they've been working hard, and they have all this geospatial information, and those are our use case. Well, that piece of land, that the organization, we work to co-evolve the perspective, so we can show the value of nature. And in this place, then you have Tamsin, and Tamsin is talking about the patterns in nature to behave as a superorganism. So this is something that happens in 7 vortex. So now the connections are getting valuable, because you have knowledge on the top of a territory linked to a person. Now we're talking about understanding how it works in terms of what we value more. So I will go back there. And this is what we saw. So from here, you have also other perspectives. So over time, I've been developing ways of understanding the territory. So I grew up in communities, in grassroots communities, in ideas from my parents about territorial development that I think they were very much ahead of their time. But I grew up in communities, so this is what I know, or what I am. So I understood that it was difficult for people to see transformation over time. So I created these rings as following the mentorship of the trees, the tree rings. When you are trying to analyze the story of the tree, and you see a cut on the rings, then you see that this is year 1, year 0, year 1, year 2, and year 3. So I've been developing this as an impact evaluation way of looking at the projects in a systemic way. So you can have traction over time. So for example, in Panama, the governance on indigenous people, maybe before they didn't recognize the rights. Now they are recognizing the rights, but they are not implementing it so far. And maybe the next stage is about this fully autonomy or implementation. And so it depends on what you want to put there, but then you can build a gradient as in nature. So you can say this is the generative. So if you think about permaculture, you will exactly know what you are talking about here. So it is up to each expert to create the gradient and the values inside. So I have created a system that allows many different perspectives on measurements and key indicators to gather together in a way that we can actually create this as another system to inform different metrics all over the world, until the point that we'll have diversity and we will be learning from each other metrics, and we can get the best out of humanity, which I think should be our purpose.
Exactly.
So,
This is beautiful. I love that. It reminds me a lot of also the donut economics. And so people who are really getting into that, they could relate to that graph a lot. And I've been playing around for years with, creating a calendar that looks like that, and just using that as my calendar, and then wanting to trace and map as the years go by to notice the patterns in my life also. And that was one of my thoughts I had earlier around seven vortex.
that's beautiful, yeah.
Hugo could do something like this. So I love it. You got it.
So here you have this, and with the donut economics, for example, the problem is it's a donut, but it is not giving you traction over time. Exactly. It is just a picture. And that happens also with finance.
Yeah.
So you are understanding the picture, but you are not understanding the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
This is what I learned in business. So my challenge coming out from business was how to create a dashboard that allows you to see change over time, because it is important to know where you come from and where are you heading. Otherwise, you get lost in the picture.
And you could, now we could use this so that, okay, if I implement this type of agriculture, then the next ring is going to be this result. If I implement this type of agriculture, then we'll get this result.
Yeah. And sometimes you will not reach a goal that you wanted, but this is why it's important to keep traction, because maybe this is also related to a year that you have a lot of rain and you need to understand the system. Yeah. So this is a visual of the system that lets you have traction over time, which could be also applied for the donut economics. Yeah. Which could be also applied to the Stockholm Resilience Center graphs. So it could be applied to all of these theories that are there. Since I'm not such a theoretical in this way methodological person, but I'm a system thinker and a visual system designer. So I was creating something that it was more flexible and adaptable to all of the things that I've been requested. So I did 10 years of impact evaluation, and it was difficult for me to explain politicians how the farmers were working, which is the same problem that I had when I needed to say to the financial, the IFM, I think, the monetary fund, or the World Bank people, and explain the same thing to indigenous people. So this makes the work.
Yes.
So one part is Seven Vortex because it allows you to connect the knowledge ecosystem, but another part is impact evaluation, which is this one. Yeah. So you are slicing the system in ways that are understandable. So,
well, this also, I mean, just in general, all of this makes me think about people who have very different learning styles. I'm very dyslexic. I know my brain works different than the modern system, but also I think of autistic people and people with Down syndrome and stuff that think in different ways. And so getting them to be able to trace their story and just share information with Seven Vortex, I think will be amazing.
Even for memory losses, you can get this story in a quicker way.
Yes.
Because you can choose your story. And on the top of Seven Vortex, we can co-develop many things. So for example, just one tool for media that actually allows you to explore the story. You can somehow do it, but you can just do it specifically for that. That wouldn't be named Seven Vortex, will be named Follow Your Story. And then that will be just a spin-off inside Seven Vortex. And this is meant to be, because I knew that I needed to build the ground
Yeah, the
and
ecosystem.
the soil to
Yeah.
have a diversity of plants and beings just growing from there. So the knowledge ecosystem, this is the version of University. I asked them to do something more like in 7, so we can explore it like this. It wasn't so complicated, but this belongs to them. So they are in the power of turning it off. But this is empowering their voice as an organization on the ground. So it is not just about uh, one voice, but it's polyvocal, as I learned also in the Art 3.0 conference.
Nice.
So they are talking about indigenous people. This is what they do. And the carbon offset, and from the carbon offset, they will have some content there. Maybe in some of them, they will have links. So this is the map that we saw. So you can connect. So in biomimicry terms, this is a tool that is modular and nested.
Yeah.
So then this is the voice of the organization, and then we move into the hive. And this is just has been released in the last 3 days as it is right now. And it's still a working prototype. But the idea here is to give voice to the locals. So what if the locals could actually come here and say, what I think is important for me, it is nature. And then I can put a picture or a video, and then I can take the picture, and then it will be okay. And then you keep going. And then I think this is the kind of tool that could be work for this social networking that you want to do. Because when you see this as a whole, so let me go, you're still there, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I didn't see you anymore, sorry.
I'm back. I'm back.
So for example, when you see this in a bigger perspective, this is what I call the hive. And this hive mind, I think this is what will be really useful for what you're asking, because it's not so complicated as mapping 7 vortex, like one person mapping everything, but will be more about each person putting its content. So the first experiment that I did is on biomimicry. So this is Tamsin, the same biomimic that I found in university. So she did the hive. In the hive, I was asking, when did you start biomimicry training? So 2013, okay, so 2013. So this is the starting question, the starting cohort question. So we have 2011 for others. And this is just one connection, and then 2011 has 4 connections. So if you see here, then there are other people that started in 2011. So you can start looking for insights and how people they can go there. So for example, she is a biomimicry professional, a specialist, and also holds a master's. So how many biomimicry professionals are around this one? And we have all these, and this is about the training. So what are the possibilities for the training to see? So master's, PhD, professional, and specialist. I'm still missing like one in-person session or like some others, but I just started with the B pros. So you can go back and forth on this approach, and I think it will give you more insights. And this is what we're putting together right now. So how the graph database is the Neo4j thing is actually helping you to understand these connections, and will give you insights about the network that you are doing. So I believe that, for example, democracy in the United States right now, if you have a voice, a fractal voice of 6, then instead of just focusing which candidate to vote for, then you will try to get the sense of the community of which of the 6 topics are important. And then the politicians should be working, whether they are from one side or the other, should be working in these main topics for each of them. So I think it's a different way to approach politics. So this is the hive, and the idea here is we're still working to bring it to the indigenous people so they can express their own feelings without you controlling them, and they can add hierarchies. So for example, nature is the number 2, but maybe I think it is the number 1, or maybe the number 6. So that also plays a role, and then you send it. So this is another possibility. And this is for the other part of the storytelling, which we call it the insights sphere. So it is just a high contrast possibility. So this land is 2/3 natural ecosystem and 1/3 degraded landscape. So you can clearly see that forest and water, it's the 2/3. And this is infrastructure and agriculture, mainly agriculture, as here is mainly water. If you go to the carbon dioxide, I told them, like, give me a percentage of the whole equation on carbon dioxide. So are you emitting a lot and are you sequestering? Because I was looking for this breathing process. So they say, actually, like it was a proxy, but they said we're producing because of the agricultural part, 3% of this. And we are sequestrating 97. So this land should be receiving the highest price in carbon offsetting. We agree. The reality is that they have no certification than just for 200 hectares, and 7,000 are non-certified because the mechanism existing in the market are not allowing them to get the money to the right place, because these perspectives come from the city. So it is about carbon and they don't get it. But if you know that the highest quality of land is a primary forest, so they have about 40 mother trees.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
In Salt Spring Island, they used to have one in Vancouver. And it is not a lot. So
wow.
if you want to put value, monetary value into something like this, then you should, but then you should value it in the way that it is, not in the way that you just understand it from, as you say, dyslexia. One dyslexia could be on one side and the other dyslexia could be on another side. So it depends who is more dyslexic and for what purposes. So
well, it's just, yeah, looking at how the system works. And
exactly. So
you know, rather than what we dictate based on economic gain in the moment. So yeah.
And this allows me to go to the last part, which is, I don't know if you are familiar with this H1, H2, and H3, like the three horizon model. So
no, not mapped out like this. Yeah.
okay, let me just copy this one, and I will show it in full screen. And this is just the conclusion. So
it's also fascinating. I love it.
so this is a template as system thinking or design thinking or business canvas or whatever templates you have. So you can put it in 7-Vortex and use it as a background. So this is about, well, here, for example, you can just take out the bubbles and the titles. So I can just show you the template. So Horizon 1 is what it is decaying right now. So this is what doesn't work and it's gonna die over time. Horizon 2, it has this possibility of breaching in between Horizon 1 and Horizon 3. The Horizon 3 is what it is our North Star. So to me, the North Star is nature. And we should be pursuing local radical harmony, which is how nature works. So if we come here and we see, for example, I love the work of Kate. So Kate is also a user of 7-Vortex. So the donut for me, it is this intersection where you explain the economics and you are breaching into the next stage of economics that we need to go. There are also these indicators that are based like R3.0 that is about carrying capacity. I think this is also breaching into a better understanding of the bioregion. And then you have ecosystem restoration that are super important, and that will be the peak. The success of that will be the peak of this breaching, because that will allow us to start really regenerating the earth in the right way. So restoring the nature. Circular economy, it is native in H2, but it is not always the case that actually is around here, because circular economy could be Monsanto acquired by Bayer, so they have the GMT products and the medicines to cure you from the sickness that they provoke. So that is also circular economy. So when I think about seven vortex, I think we are more here as biomimicry and following nature patterns. This is the idea on energy exchanges that I was explaining with a different visual. So you have this energy exchanges. The computing system is binary right now. So it's plus and zeros, one and zeros. Nature is one, zeros, and minus one. And accounting as well. So the trick now in business is that they are not accounting the damage that they are doing in the planet. So it is very easy to just make positive profit if you don't have to take out the value of the materials that you need to recycle, for example. So this is the energy exchanges, and then you go in something like, for example, the Capital Institute, which it is based on living systems, but it is in a way also about very human perspective. And then it is fine, but I think Virtual Gaia, this is also in the third horizon, the Capital Institute. Virtual Gaia could enhance this kind of perspective. So by putting, for example, this in the rings or this in the rings, and then we can do something. There is seeds, I don't know if you're familiar, but they are regenerative money. And I think they're also very native in this third horizon. So how can we also connect seeds and Virtual Gaia? And this is where I go to metabolic earth. And what I'm trying to achieve in the future is also this Haifa Club, which is this kind of social network, but the way I see it is more a bio network. So it is about fostering collaborations. And for me, the beginning of that is the Hive, by understanding what are the common ground in between people of the same territory. Instead of focusing in the differences, then how we create common ground, fertility, and then from there we can move. So hoping that this kind of tool will allow me to build the next level of social networks as a cultural evolution also for humanity, bringing Virtual Gaia, ecosystem restoration, and enhancing them, because I think they are super nice approach and important one. So it is more about symbiotic relationships than not. So, well, this is the whole thing. I think it's a long pitch, but so you understand the whole picture, because I think with this, you will also get the idea on how to use it in all these things that you had in mind, which are systemic from my perspective.
Yes, exactly. Wow. Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate all the detail there, and I'm glad I recorded so I can share with some others that are so interested in this also, so that you don't have to give the same presentation again.
Yeah.
I'll have them just watch that and we can go from there.
Yeah, and please share with me the link so I can also download it.
Yes, yeah, I will. And in fact, I'm going to stop.
Yeah.